the Special Board and Education and Business Committee meeting to order for Wednesday, April 19th. We respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. We have an agenda before you. Is there any changes or additions to the agenda?
She's ready for you.
Trustee Smith, seconded by Trustee Thorne. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Jason, I think it's your show.
Thank you. On the table is a reconciliation of where the budget is at to date. And I want to walk through each of the options in a little more detail. So they've been at quite a high level so far. Now we wanted to talk to the board about the reasons for some of these options, and each one of the note pages, which is this package here, corresponds to an option that's going to be presented here this evening. So you'll find a description here, as well as a cumulative reconciliation on the larger sheet, which looked larger on my screen than it does here. I realize the font is quite small. Apologize for that. We could have done that over 2 pages. So we'll start with our presentation here. We have a few slides prepared, but a lot of it we'll just be talking to the individual items on the slides as we go along. So the first one, we all know that from our previous meetings together, that when we rolled over the 2016-17 budget to 2017-2018 and adjusted for known changes, that the difference between the revenues and expenditures was $979,244. So that meant that expenditures were greater than revenues, a position the board is not permitted to be in when filing their budget. So that was the starting point, $979,244. So we've talked about that probably enough. What has happened since the last BEBC meeting? The budget survey closed on April the 9th, Sunday. There were 204 responses to the survey. That survey, details have been provided to the board, along with a summary which was reviewed yesterday at the advisory group. The board met with education partners yesterday at advisory, as I just said, and there they were presented with the survey results. And staff since then, that time, have been working on estimating the impact of some proposed options, and tonight are bringing an updated reconciliation and some more details to the trustees. So we're not going to go through those. We're going to go through where how we're getting to the options here. So very first one is the first slide starts off with the opening shortfall of $979,000. That is the number we're trying to solve. Is the very first column on this budget sheet, which shows you the percentages being allocated to each of the programs within the instruction, administration, operations, and maintenance and transportation budgets. So at this time, before we begin with any adjustments, the budget is again short $979,244, or about 1.3% of the operating budget total. So now going through, the numbers that will come up here will correspond with the note numbers. The note numbers will correspond with the item that reconciles onto the larger sheet here. So the first one, we've shown the board and advisory committee yesterday that the most recent year-end projections shows a surplus of $1,842,975. So we would be suggesting accessing $1 million of that surplus and leaving $842,000 in unrestricted surplus, which represents the contingency of approximately 1.1% of the annual budget. So a contingency of between 1% and 2% is consistent with ministerial recommendations. So we think leaving that surplus is a good thing to have in the event of any unknowns that may come the board's way. Also good just to have something in the bank for a rainy day fund, again, if something comes that's unknown. So that's the very first item. So that helps, right? So that actually, a positive on this reconciliation shows that it's something that's assisting with the shortfall, and a negative will add to it as we go through this exercise. The second note, 2, is an increase in the international program tuition. Last year, when the board was going through their budget process, they approved an increase in the international program tuition rate from $12,500 to $13,000. It takes a year before that becomes actually implemented, because at the time that the board are setting their budget, most of the students are in for the next year already. And you need to set the rate for the year following when you're recruiting in the next year's cycle. So that is now revenue that can be recognized. There's approximately 200 students in the program, and that increase of $500 per student will bring another $100,000 to the board.
Are we anticipating any increase in the number of international students?
I think optimistically, yes. We're not sure how that fits with the space requirements, so we're still, there may be an opportunity to, but we have to see through the classroom enhancement implications to know if there's going to be international student space available in the schools.
Trustee Thorne?
Just a question or a comment. Are you speaking with Liz? I'm concerned over the issue with the direct flights to U.S. from U.S. to Canada, and the way the immigration laws that are in place now with the Americans, that some of them may get turned back
For
school.
Something to look into?
And its impact on our international program?
Yeah, preventing some of these kids from coming back from China because of the way.
oh, I see, the routing of the fighting.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it is something we've been talking about
Yes.
with this and trying to make sure those kids are on direct flights.
Thank you. I'll move on if there's no questions on that item. Note number 3 represents an increase of $10,000 to the investment revenue. This is aligning historical amounts with the budget. So over the last few years, the amount that the board has generated through holdings with the Ministry of Finance and within the board's bank account has exceeded the budget, and now we're bringing the budget up to what we think it will be. I mean, if the money has been there the last couple of years, we think it's a pretty safe adjustment to make here.
Mr. Sandquist, that advisory meeting, I believe you used a number of $8 million in that account?
But $8.5 million.
And 4-point-something was attributed to,
Unfunded employee future benefits.
and that is a direct allocation from the province to do that, or we've accumulated that over
We've
time?
accumulated it over time. There's still about $167,000 that the board is working to fully fund that, and there's a line item in the budget for $50,000 that pays towards fully funding that amount. So it's been a long transition to put that money away. But early on, when the board was required to recognize the unfunded employee future benefits, somewhere around 2001, 2002, the ministry was funding the boards at about this board at about $500,000 a year. That disappeared when most boards had reached full funding much in advance of this board. This board has, as retirement benefits for their employees, significantly more expensive retirement benefits than most other boards in the province, so it takes longer to pay down the amount that you'll need to pay those people out.
And the investment revenue is not required to stay in that account, it actually can be used for general operations? That's what we're doing here?
Yes, yeah, it's all general operations, all the investment revenue. We also invest other than the scholarships, we keep there's some endowments, about $93,000 that sit with the board for future scholarship payouts. They generate more money with the Ministry of Finance than they do in the bank, and that's good for students, so we allocate a portion of the Ministry of Finance revenue there as well for those scholarship payouts. Okay. The next item, note 4, in the early preliminary budget position to get to the $979,000, we had reduced the rental revenues by approximately $40,000 because we're not sure about the impact of the classroom enhancement fund and the memorandum of agreement on Bill 28 on the ability for the board to continue to house the daycares, because any third-party tenant had to be replaced in favor of a classroom before additional funding would be provided by the ministry for space expansion. So It looks like the impact may not be as significant as anticipated in the schools where those daycares exist. So we are wanting to reintroduce $20,000 back to that revenue account. Not the entire amount, we're still not 100% sure that we'll have full restoration, but we think $20,000 is a safe amount to bring back. Note number 5, again, it's a positive, so it's helping the budget here. It has two components to it. The first one is, as we go through the year, it is normal for teachers in the system to leave for medical or retirements. And the average teacher salary is really set for ministry funding on the September 30th numbers. So throughout the year, staff leave and new teachers are hired, and they typically cost less than the staff that have left, based on where staff are on the experience grid. When we start this budget, we look at the staff from the previous year's budget, or the amended budget, and we roll them over. So we roll over everybody who is currently here this year into next year. And we certainly know that we also have some retirements that always happen every year, and hired with some younger people. Also this year with the Classroom Enhancement Fund, and we'll get more into the details later on in this presentation, we expect that there'll be a lot of new hires to the school district, and those will in theory drive down the average teacher salary cost. So we believe we can reduce the budget by about $200,000 on wage costs on teachers for those two reasons.
So can I just understand the layout of your spreadsheet here then? You said this is a positive to the budget, and you've got it in brackets at 200,000. The previous 4 were all positives to the budget, and you don't have them in brackets.
Yeah, they're in the revenues. They're on the revenue side of the sheet, which is adding to the revenues and then subtracting from the expenditures on the lower part of the spreadsheet.
Okay.
It feels like it's backwards.
I know it does. It's hard to lay it out.
Thank you.
So the very next item is after 6 years, in 2016-2017, wage freeze on the principals, vice principals, and exempt staff was lifted. And this allowed the transition of non-unionized staff members onto a regional salary model. Now for the principals and vice principals that transitioned, they are at the first step of a 3-step regional grid. There still has been no release to move those individuals any further than step A. There's a step B and a step C. There may be an opportunity in 2017-2018 for that to occur with the board's support, and that will be part of keeping the compensation for the principals and vice principals group competitive with the neighbors. And also to allow for increases as the other employee groups will all have increases which have been negotiated in their collective agreements. So we're not sure what that amount might be that the ministry could or BCPC could approve, so we're suggesting setting aside $100,000 for that purpose. So that is a negative on here because it offsets the shortfall in a negative way, but it's a positive on here because it adds to the adds to the expenditure. So I know they're backwards. The next item is around technology, updating the wireless network. So over the last few years, the technology budget has been reduced by approximately $100,000 or roughly 20% in two $50,000 reductions. There is a need to replace the aging wireless system throughout the school district, and that system has been estimated at a cost of $200,000. So we believe that by reintroducing $100,000 to that budget over a 2-year or multi-year plan, that can be accomplished. So previously that was done out of annual facilities grant. So the reason it's being proposed in the operating budget is the annual facilities grant. When you board received a presentation on the spending plan, there was a significant pressure on roofing needs for the district, so we weren't able to accommodate wireless network within that budget and still have dry schools. So the next item that we're proposing as an increase, so again, a negative up here and a positive on your sheet, is in and around the area of staff development funds. Currently, there's a budget of $139,450, and that covers off all the development for teaching staff and for principals and vice principals. It typically covers the cost of a TTOC, so the teacher can be released to participate in a staff development activity. At one time, that budget was at a high of $450,000 per year. Certainly with the new introduction of the curriculum, staff feel that it would be a positive to support the development, staff development for our staff, and this is a step towards that.
Trustee Spilsbury.
Just trying to align some of the other information, education grant, was it? $147,000?
150,000.
150,000, wouldn't that be added into staff development, or is that something else?
Some of it is as well. That is another budget that does also support some staff development. Correct. It also supports some staffing as well.
Okay, then, my question then, suppose 100,000 of it would go into staff development then? And my question really is, what do you think is needed for staff development in our ability to be able to use it? Because I know in the past years when it was fairly high, a lot of it was constantly surplus funds at the end of the year because we couldn't have the time or the staff to do that. So.
Correct. Part of it is having individuals who are able to arrange for the staff development. I believe that comes up a little bit later in a proposal out of the classroom enhancement overhead and operating expenditures. You'll see a position which will tie partly into this request. So
Okay.
no, you don't mean wait and see, but possibly superintendent can answer.
Again, we're in a period of pretty great change, provincially and locally, and conditions now seem pretty ripe to move forward on a variety of fronts around staff development kinds of issues. We have good personnel in place, and it seems like it's an opportune time to be moving forward.
Trustees.
Thank you for asking that question, because you're right, we usually 250,000 of the max that was 450,000 was being rolled back in the surplus. So I guess if money's coming from one area, or if we, you know, it's coming from another area, so you're saying 100,000 from the other money will put up to 239, and then you're saying 100,000 out of this budget put it up to 339. Are you confident that that money's going to be used, or are we just tucking it away? Like, are you confident? I mean, that's a huge jump, $200,000.
We have huge needs for staff development. I'm not sure how else to put it, but we have huge needs for staff development. Teachers are asking for it. Like I say, will I guarantee we use every penny of it? No. But we're ready. And I think we have a pretty good plan and some staffing in place to support that, so I think now's the time.
So how long ago was it $450,000?
Six or 7 years ago at least.
And at present time, are teaching staff allocated a certain amount per staff member allowed for coding? Is it $300 a year? Or?
It's 4% of the October payroll, which is then given to the teachers union to distribute as they wish. So it's part of the collective agreement. So it's not included in that total.
So this is not.
Or they're self-directed?
Yes.
Yes.
This is not that.
Okay, what is this? It's not self-directed. What is it?
It's bringing groups of teachers together it augments a lot of the work that is the self-directed piece, bringing together groups of teachers to look at coding, bringing together groups of teachers to look at how they are addressing behavioral needs in classrooms, bringing students with unique needs, working on the new curriculum, groups of teachers starting to understand how that new curriculum impacts learning, the kinds of things it enables and facilitates.
So So is this organized and administered by the central office, or is this in conjunction with the Teachers Association, or how is this money utilized?
The professional development allocation is by the union, by individual teachers. This is through the school board office, through district staff, but also in collaboration with the teachers union as to how, what we see the needs are, how we would move forward in addressing those needs.
Any other questions on this one? Next one.
The next item is number 9, and this is around the identification of a significant number of additional students in the last year that have special designations or learning needs. So we've been working within the existing teaching staffing allocation that's in the budget. Certainly there's approximately 412 teachers in this budget, plus principals and vice principals, and that total is then allocated out to schools and to district programs. So the way that's all sort of fitting right now, we have made some changes in student support services that haven't required any additional staffing to be added to the budget, so it's just really been a reallocation to meet some of those needs. So we have a zero amount there.
And do we still have EAs outstanding to be hired?
I think we're pretty good.
Oh, pretty good. Just a problem.
I'm just wondering if we have any particular plans or vision coming up for any enhancements to how we're serving our special needs students next year. Might be one for Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, next year and the ongoing years, and that's part of that staff development, is how we address those needs in ways that are inclusive and not exclusionary. So that's a large part of the staff development that needs to happen, needs to be led. We also do need some increases in staffing, and as the Secretary Treasurer said, we've accomplished those sort of within, to put in some modest increases in staff in that area. But a large part of that is how those students, the classroom into which those students are included, and how we think about that. So that's a large part of our focus.
Paul?
I'm just sort of interested in some of the on-the-ground things. This is a very, I suspect, idiosyncratic task to try and meet the needs of a lot of different students with different needs. So are you practically doing this one by one to get these kids what they need, or how do you look at it?
Yes.
Yes to all of the above.
Yes, yes to all of the above. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a student by student. What does this student need? What does that student need? What does this teacher need to support that student or those students? And yet there are certainly some trends and some commonalities. But they do play out differently for each child. And so, and with each teacher and what their skill set is and their experience and those kinds of things. So it's a sort of a combination. We know that in terms of managing students on the autism spectrum, there's a collection of skills that we need to be working on as a group. On the teaching side and the support side to support students with those kinds of communication issues and behavioral things that present as behavior. Same thing on moderate and intensive behavior. There's a cluster of things there that we need to be focusing on with all of our staff, but they do play out uniquely and differently in each case, but there are some common threads for sure.
Last one. And there are some new monies available for classroom supplies. And as I understand, a lot of special needs kids have some pretty particular needs for equipment and stuff. Is that part of the picture for next year?
From that fund?
Yeah.
That fund is
Does that
certainly something
cover
we're,
that?
it could.
It could.
Again, we're having those conversations with
Okay.
DPAC and so on as to how that might play out. There are other sources of funding for equipment and supplies through SETBC and so on that we access.
That's why I was really pleased with the, we're talking about support for the teachers, because I depend solely on them. They're the ones that need the training so that they can eyeball a situation far more than we can and make recommendations for, you used the word autism, assessments that need to happen. I have nothing but praise. I think taking care of the teachers with more and more training, it's a plus. There's no way we can lose. You know, they're on the front lines. Except with me.
Note 10.
Note, at district and school level administration. So there are 3 positions here that are being proposed. The first one, and what is proposed here is the salary differential, because within the existing staffing in the budget, portion of these positions would already be covered. So it's basically the average teacher salary. So it's taking a position and moving it into an administration position. So first one to be considered would be a district principal of distributed learning and career programming. The title may be something slightly different than that. We believe that position would self-fund itself in probably about a year. The purpose would be to generate additional revenues through distributed learning and work experience, careers,
Dual credit.
placements, dual credits, and to build that side of the board's organization.
Trustee Sun.
Now, I know that Dave Bellis was kind of doing this when he was over with adult. Is Larry not doing this now? So are you feeling that the job is too big, that we need to hire another individual on top of that?
Split off.
So would this position be under that administrator or be reporting to him?
We would be reporting to an assistant superintendent.
The other 2 positions here are salary differential. There's 2 elementary schools where, based on the needs of those 2 schools, it's thought that they would both benefit from extra support. And those positions would come out of the existing staffing, because there's already teaching staffing allocated there. Would just be adding a small amount of VP time to create an extra level of support for those 2 schools. You know, if the superintendent wants to mention those 2 schools, or
Schools that are in need of extra support.
Okay.
be early to say which ones.
They would be schools that currently don't, by formula, meet that requirement, but by need, certainly do.
Trustee Croft.
I just wanted to speak in support of the distributed learning person. I think that's probably great, and I know from CVOC that there are a lot of pressures on distributed learning, and I think they're stretched pretty thin, so great idea, thank you.
So the district principal of distributed learning and career prep program, would this include CTC or is that different?
Yes, it would include. It will be, as Jason said, the title doesn't quite do it justice without being 10 words long, but it would be a collection of things, especially predominantly in the distributed learning area and in the skills, trades, dual credit area, which is where that self-funded nature comes from, a lot of it.
Or would this individual actually be engaging with those students that want to, are they the face-to-face person?
They would be, yes, one of the face-to-face people. They would also be engaging with the universities, with COSN, with students at each of the high schools, working with them.
It's a very entrepreneurial type of position in that it will self-generate. It will start to generate additional funding, we believe, for the board, which will sustain it and provide more opportunities for students.
Trustee Thorne, then Trustee Spiller.
I think it's a good thing to have a district principal for learning, because as per survey, kids are indicating they wanted more careers. So it's going to take more than one. Larry's doing a great job I work with them quite a bit at VIU level, and I know it's a cumbersome job, very tiresome, working with in industrial trades and how standards are met and changes to all ongoing programs that we have now. And I think this other person will be very beneficial because kids who go to high school, they don't want to just be carpenters, they don't want to be whatever they want. There's a variety of different careers out there that need to be investigated for these kids.
Trustee Spillier.
Just a quick comment on the need to increase our personalized learning and career options for our kids. And we know that both distributed learning and dual credit trades are at a point where it's growing, but it's almost like a benchmark where it needs some new energy to push it beyond where it is now. And so I'm very supportive of that position as well.
Note 11.
Note 11, the district currently has approximately 22 trades workers, there's grounds workers, equipment operators, and other. We have 12 of the, I think approximately 22 trades workers supported in the maintenance budget, and approximately 10 plus, I believe, the equipment operator on capital. In the long term, we don't think that is going to be sustainable for the district. As capital projects shift, they have a lot of individuals who are here for the reconfiguration, and we've been working to find other capital projects to keep them going. So although we haven't put an amount in yet in the budget consideration, it would be approximately $75,000 per tradesperson to bring somebody back over. But we know it's something that will have to be addressed in the near future, but we haven't fit it in here yet. So just here as a reminder or a consideration for the board.
Trustee Smith.
I know we did discuss having a couple people move back in, so just for ours, why didn't you include it in here? Because it was something that we had talked about, we don't want to lose young, good, new people, and that's kind of important, and I know we discussed it, so I'm just wondering why it's not showing up in here.
I think for the next year, there are some non-seismic funds, non-structural seismic funding, which hopefully will support these positions, and hopefully retirements will also support maintaining the staff that we're talking about. Certainly we could put it back in here. It would increase the amount that the board would be looking for. So I do tell you what the amount is, but we were trying to get closer to something that was balanced for considerations. This is not a balanced presentation yet. So something coming in, something has to come out yet. So, yeah.
Note 12.
And just another on the radar item is around operations and custodial equipment. Recently, the board was able to buy, or is in the process of purchasing approximately $30,000 worth of custodial equipment. When the Director of Operations and I looked through some budgets that were looking to be under expended for the year, we were able to find some pockets to support that. But typically, it's supported out of the maintenance budgets for equipment replacement. Another item that is currently being looked at is a hoist for the transportation department, as we have some buses that don't fit on the big hoist or they don't fit on the little hoist, and there's in between size that we need to address. So we are looking to do some equipment replacement out of existing budgets, but at some point things are getting kind of old and need to be thinking about establishing somebody. So we haven't put anything in here yet because we do tend to maneuver a bit within the budget, but it's going to reach a point that it'll be beyond the maneuvering. So it's more of a reminder item.
So why doesn't it remind us to create a capital, small equipment capital reserve?
Could do that if that's the board's wish.
Certainly would avoid having the ups and downs and have a constant amount of replacement based on. So how do we do that? Whether it's $50,000 this year and another $50,000 next year, whatever it is. We have no equipment replacement plan. Well,
What the board has is local capital funding, which is from building sales, from past property dispositions that are accessible. This year, the board committed in last year's budget process $25,000 out of that fund for the replacement of a vehicle. A nice little van was purchased. It wasn't 25,000. It was used. I think it was 17,000. So there is a fund, and I think there's a couple.
You got a span for 17.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
used
great
van.
van.
It's a really cool little van. But there's about $1.1 million sitting in that fund. That is there for either future buildings, future school replacements, equipment replacement. So there are capital funds. We just need the board's approval if you wish to access them for that purpose.
Because one of the messages I received, reading over the survey comments, is custodial equipment, resources. So it's apparent to our other parents or community members saying that perhaps we can invest more in that. So, any other comments on this one? Trustees Pillsbury, then Thorne, and Croft?
I just support finding a way to do something, whether it's, you know, having a fund that's ready to go or whatever, because we've heard of that need for the last 4 years. Well, 3 years, thank you. The last 3 years, every year it comes up.
It just seems like.
It seems like more than 4, but yeah.
Trustee
So-
Thorne?
I agree with Trustee Spilsbury, because we did talk about this last year. You know, my concern was the janitorials and the old vacuum equipment that they were lugging around. And I remember that we had then stated we were going to try to figure out something. So I second Trustee Spilsbury suggested that we create or find some money to create a fund for these. It's ready to go whenever needed.
So when we meet again next week, we'll look at options for what that could look like and how to include that.
Trustee Croft, do you want to add to this story?
Sorry, I can't resist. Yes, and I think that by sort of having that money ready in your hand, I think it's a lot easier for people who are doing those jobs to sort of know, well, gee, there's a chance I can get this old thing replaced next year. And I agree with you. I just hear too much about some of the extra pressures in the job because of the equipment. So I like the idea of having it ready to go.
Trustee Smith?
Through the chair, Secretary Treasurer. So I only have personal knowledge of all of the auto scrubbers as far as what the costs are and. My question is a little fund is nice. However, the costs to replace the equipment that is in really poor condition, and that's me saying it politely, is way more than $30,000. So I know that, you know, they've talked about robbing one machine to fix another, and we're talking about, you know, health and safety. I mean, this health in our classrooms, and, you know, don't have cleaner and janitorial closets like run out. Like we hear the stories all the time. So, you know, that money that you say is kind of tucked away, maybe we should be looking at a larger amount to be able to do a more thorough job, and maybe that'll help us in the long run with sick leave and if we can keep our classrooms so neat and cleaner.
So, something for next week?
Yes, we'll look at some options for next week.
Who knows how to work cut out
Sorry, Jason.
for? 13.
This is another item that we had on the list that we haven't allocated anything out to yet, but a little bit through the classroom enhancement fund coming up through the overhead and the administration component. So we didn't put anything in here at this time, but we know that if you go around the schools, a lot of the furniture is very aged. The district has declined kind of over the last couple of decades from around 11,000 students down to where we are now at about 7,700 students. A lot of the furniture has been tucked away in crawl spaces, but most of it has been pulled out, whatever was salvageable. And now that it's very slow growth at this point, but at some point we'll have to start thinking about replacement of some school furniture. It's expensive.
superintendent, secretary, treasurer, myself, and trustee Thorne had the pleasure of sitting in some really cool cage desks at Quamagen. And that doesn't really, sorry, but it was quite the experience. When we talked about our furniture not being appropriate for learning in the new style of learning, you know, do we know what it would cost? I mean, that was ridiculous when we're all sitting in those little caged-in desks. Do we know what the cost would be to relook at tables and chairs instead of?
I've asked our buyer for an estimate, I just haven't received it yet. I know that, I think when we put a set into Chemainus, a new set of classroom furniture, it was somewhere around $6,000 or $7,000 for the classroom, so that's one classroom. Okay. Thank you.
Try to start somewhere.
Correct.
14.
Teacher staffing contingency. We have, still do have one within the existing allocation, and that's why this amount is at zero. It's not a large one. We're struggling with whether we're comfortable with it, the education team and myself. But at this point, I guess we are comfortable with it, that there are a couple of staff still left that haven't been allocated. And the reason to have those staff is in the event of enrollment drop and not being able to recover, the staff and having your revenue now drop with enrollment drop, or having teachers or students arrive at schools where you need to put an extra teacher in, but it doesn't actually generate enough money to pay for the extra teacher. So there's a small contingency there. As well, the board still has the unrestricted surplus in the background, so we didn't put anything into that account. Note 15 is around 2 existing clerical positions where there's a demand to work, for those positions to work a little bit, a week kind of after the end of the school year and a week before the school year, particularly in the area of the career students. So there's 2 jobs that are looking at adding 2 weeks each too.
Trustee Smith, Trustee Thorne. Sorry.
Oh,
Is that
me?
correct? Yes,
Okay.
Trustee Stoughton.
I was gonna say, I don't know.
We've heard a bit about clerical staff feeling under pressure, overextended hours in the day. So I'm trying to balance that with kind of a rocky start to the year in terms of changes everywhere for clerical people, and maybe, I don't know, if we have a bunch of new people perhaps, and the level of training that was needed. I mean, help me try to understand, or do we need to look at that more thoroughly, or is it just, we will catch up?
It's not a usual process for QP clerical to have an assignment meeting, but there was a significant amount, enough amount of change in last year's budget. So last year's budget challenges are more significant, and a couple of positions with some key senior employees were changed or eliminated, causing a significant amount of bumping. So as somebody who has their job affected, they have the option of accepting the change or taking another position as their seniority permits. So we did have a very significant shuffle and a full assignment meeting, which is similar to the e-education assistant process, where everybody was in the room and choosing pretty much a new job for the year. So that is one of the main reasons for such a rocky start. This budget does not have reductions to clerical. There wouldn't be the same disruption next year. It would just be retirees causing people to choose new jobs and potentially move a little bit. So I think it has settled, but it was definitely a rocky start.
Can I just follow up with that? But I'm still hearing those concerns now. So, like, do we need more professional development support, or I'm trying to think of how we alleviate the kind of stress that has been reported to us.
We had an idea early on that was part of our overhead and administration on the classroom enhancement fund side that hasn't remained because of the additional cost pressure related to replacing the teachers as part of that fund. but at one point we were proposing, I guess it was really a floater position for QP, a bookable person who would have experience in schools and be able to be those schools that were falling behind or just needed help for a day or 2 days. This person would be available to be booked and would not book, but just be the top person on the call-out list for the day. There's always somebody away every day. So we haven't been able to, we haven't continued on with that idea, but it seemed to have some merit in backing up our trainer for the MyEd BC. When she goes out to do training, if she had somebody who really knew all the schools who could sit in and take over for that secretary or that clerical worker, seemed to be an advantage. We were trying to come up with something that would. It's difficult to put hours into a school when they're kind of at the limit, but you have a 4-hour minimum, and to add 4 hours to a school might take them from 7 hours a day to 11 hours a day. So we were trying to see if there was a way to kind of float somebody that could add time when needed, and haven't really solidified that.
John, you want to add to this?
I'll just add to that, and I think part of the Jason talked about the professional or the learning component of that. It's difficult for a clerical position to come out, get that training on MyEd or whatever it might be, and then they go back to an increased workload because the work didn't happen. Even if there was someone there covering, they're not processing the things in the same way, and so we sort of get into this downward spiral. So that was the idea of being able to provide more learning opportunities for our clerical folks, and yet not have them fall behind because they're out taking that training. And so it's shifted to the side of it, but it's not off the table as something we're trying to figure out how we could add that support. But I think we shouldn't underestimate the impact of the first few months of, because it wasn't just one set of moves. It was a churn for a few months as people were trying out different positions.
And that concept was about $49,000.
That was my major concern was, I heard this yesterday about clerical being stressed stressed almost exhaustion, so I wanted to make sure that we were, if it means we sit down and meet with these folks to find out what the problems could be that may have been missed over our conversations here at the table, just to make sure that we do due diligence as far as keeping everybody happy. I know it's a big request, but it's something that concerns me.
You said that we don't, because I don't want to even think about that other $800,000, so I won't. However, you talked about the February and May count totals haven't come in, and how much are you projecting that will add to the $800,000 surplus? 800 and change, actually.
You could wait to note 19.
Okay.
I'll have.
I'm just thinking,
yeah,
$49,000. Okay, good. I'll wait. Thank you.
So let me just go back to this $4,000. What are we trying to fix here? Because it seems like a very small contribution to this challenge. And do we have clerical staff in our schools the first week of July, the last week of August, and which schools are needing this additional support, which is all our schools, it seems a very small number.
Yeah. This is at Seavolk, and what's occurring out there is their staff shut down earlier and come back later than the rest of the system. So it's really to align them with the rest of the schools because their work in the wind down and in the startup, they don't have people there. So it's aligning with the rest of the system, which has that week after and that week before.
Life insurance.
We were really happy to see this already cost $5,600 after the $418,000 premium change. So what we had is we had another update on the teachers' group life insurance premium, and it's $5,600. That has no choice about it. It's just another cost pressure that we're bringing to your attention. That came in after the last time. A good news item, the levy that the Ministry of Education takes from the school board to support the Next Generation Network went down for 2017-2018 by $23,682 from what's currently in the budget. So that's a positive one.
When does this next generation end?
Oh, it'll just be a new one.
The gift that keeps on giving.
It'll never end.
The board will be paying for this for a while.
There's the V, just keep sucking right now.
Note 18 is on the Community Link fund. So the board has a special purpose fund called Community Link, and it is in place to address sort of the needier portion or population of the school district. The funding for that fund is $636,178. We think at the end of this year there'll be $45,000 left. But due to increased costs and some planned surplus utilization, the surplus was as high as $130,000, and you're not really supposed to carry one. You can't have these funds in a deficit. There was an additional student support staff worker added for this past year as well that helped to utilize some of the funds. But when we go through the 4 areas here, which I've listed for you, school meals program, early learning program, community school and behavior programs, the budget in the roller is $722,474. It leaves the board short by $40,851, which either needs to be reduced from Community Link or supported by the operating budget.
Trustee Smith.
So when we first went through this Community Links and I saw that we're putting out $100,000 for food, just the food piece on the breakdown that we got before, and I talked about us getting into partnership, something similar to the Starfish program where Save On Foods is giving them their food at cost. And I'm wondering if this $40,000 shortage is next to nothing if we went into partnership with somebody to try, because our community is so amazing when it comes to food for kids and what they're doing for the Starfish program. I truly believe that this isn't a cost pressure. I truly believe if we went to one of our local grocery stores that they would give us our food at cost, and that bill will drop substantially. I mean, $100,000 just in food, and we're paying regular price. So I'm thinking if we go into partnership, this is not a cost pressure at all.
Do we have a central purchasing agent for this food, or is it done by school or?
By school.
Trustee Switzer.
Do we have any details around those food acquisitions? Like, do they already get it at cost from some schools, or donated from somewhere? Do we have any idea?
I don't have the details.
I think anecdotally, we could find you that specific information. Anecdotally, it's a combination of all of those. There are lots of donations that do come in. There are some things that are purchased. There's some things that are purchased at cost. Different schools and different communities have sort of different arrangements.
I don't think we could proceed on anything unless we got the details.
That's still worth looking into.
Yes.
If somebody's willing to help us cut our food bill down, then that would be great, without taking away from kids.
And the early learning program, $41,000, what are we investing in there, and what initiative is that?
That supports the early learning coordinator, provides clerical time and supplies for the community outreach.
Not for the work she does inside the district, but for the work she does just out in the community.
Maybe we can have a story on that later. Moving on to 19.
19, this is the final note that we have here. In this year's budget, the 16-17 budget, the board supported some staffing in the areas of distributed learning, trades, through the Industry Training Authority, and work experience. And those staff have been working to generate additional student FTE in the February and May months. So further to Trustee Smith's point about surplus funds and where will they be going. The idea of that of the generation is to start to self-fund the programs from the year, the revenue generated in the year prior, so that the staffing out of those programs doesn't become a cost pressure for the board. So it takes that first year to sort of invest in those staff to then generate the revenue which will pay for them the next year and the next year and the next year. So what this is because these staff do need to appear in the budget and we do need to appropriate that revenue. That revenue has not been brought in to the February and May counts, but it is expected. So it's not in the projection that you see because it's already really been restricted to pay for these staff in the next year. So the February and May counts are expected to be higher, quite a bit higher, in the area around dual credit and the work experience and distributed learning. But about 394,000 of that is going to be rolled over to support the staffing for the next year.
Trustee Smith.
So what are you expecting the bottom line to be? Is it enough?
I don't have the
About
final
46,000?
count yet. I wish I.
But you're confident that it's more than the $394,700?
Yes.
Isn't he being coy?
Trustee Spilsbury.
That was my question. Good.
Okay. So when all of that happens, it's still $66,000 short without looking at some of the other comments that have been brought forward by trustees around clerical supports, around equipment replacement, around transition of trade staff in. And that $66,000 is approximately 0.1%. It's less than 0.1% of the budget. It's not a significant challenge at this point to probably go back and locate and come back with a balanced budget. But certainly you know now that there's some other things the board want us to investigate around the foods and community link in the next week around again those other potential cost pressures. So right away the $40,000 for community link, if that was found somewhere else in the community, then there would be a $26,000 shortfall, which is not huge at this point. So
Could you just back me up in terms of where you got the 66,000 from? I mean,
everything adds up to that. So when you add in all the revenue changes that we brought in from off the 979,000,
yeah.
and you subtract all the additional savings for cost savings, and you add back in the cost pressures, it nets out at $66,000. That's the shortfall.
No, but if I'm looking at the spreadsheet and I see the surplus added 1.3 million, but I don't see the deduction that adds up to 1.3 million expenditures.
Okay, so on the sheet here, if you look at the total of the options under the total April 19th options, the total revenue has an increase of $1,524,700. It's the third column over from left. The expenditures have an increase of $611,503. So that's a net of about $900,000. So that $900,000, which is a net revenue position, is taken off the $979,000, leaves the board with $66,000 still short. So another way to look at it would be when you add that $1.5 million to the 76,618, which is right over on the left-hand side. There's a adjusted revenue of $78,143, which is over on the the right-hand side. So look under the column projection if all April 19th options implemented. And you see the new revenue total of $78,143,244.
Yeah.
So that's changed from the starting revenue total of $76,618 for the surplus, the international program, investment revenue, rentals revenue. Okay? And then if you go down to the very bottom of that same column, the total operating expenditures, that's changed by a net of $611,503. So now the difference between the $78,143 and the $78,209 is $66,000. So that's the updated budget position.
You want to say that, Dan?
No, that's a good thing.
Okay. So that's what we're trying to portray on a single sheet is how we're moving from where we started to where we're at with what's on the board. So we know there's more work to do. The next meeting is the one where, next week, where we hope that the Board Education and Business Committee will be in a position to recommend a balanced budget to the board, because that will happen two days later. So we're gonna have to bring back some more options and reflect on your comments and see what we can do here.
So, Trustee Spillier.
Well, I was just going to say thank you to all of the staff for presenting this so clearly and taking us in a progressive mode, because that's helpful. Thinking through what would be the best options for us, and it's always wonderful to know that we're still sitting with some surplus there, so we're not busting the bank. So we've got some cushions. That's great. Thank you.
Trustee Spillier.
Yeah, thank you as well. I think this is the first time in a very long time I've seen such a huge build in a budget put back. You know, I mean, all these extra staffing to get that, you know, careers and everything else rolling. I mean, that's like, you know, that's almost $400,000. Like, that just excites me, and that it's gonna take care of itself. There's a lot of putback in this budget that we haven't seen in a very long time. I can only imagine the work you guys had to put into it to try and do this, and I know that we're asking for different options just so that we can look at different options, but you know, just thank you for all that you've done, and you've definitely given me a boatload to think about, so I appreciate it.
Okay, well, we're not completely finished
but lots to think
with
about.
today's presentation either. You know, we as staff were putting this together, we did try to reflect on the liaison meetings that the board has had with the partner groups as well as advisory, the survey feedback, and the board's own strategic priorities, and creating some of these options, and looking at the areas where we thought enhancement may be suggested. Certainly, you know, not every item on here had recommendations with it, but a lot of them were reminders that there's things that need to be dealt with eventually, if not this year. I mentioned that it was 0.1% of the annual budget, which is currently what the board is short. That's very, very close. And we have talked about the proposals and recommendations at this point. So I want to move a little bit into the classroom enhancement fund and the implications of the memorandum of agreement for the committee. So this slide has shown up a few times, but it's been altered just slightly because staff believe we're getting closer to understanding the implications. Excuse me. In regular discussions with the Cowichan Valley Teachers Federation, we're getting closer to understanding how to interpret the memorandum of agreement and how it applies with our own local collective agreement. So there are two components to it. One is $8.4 million on the teacher compensation. Now that is only paid out if you require $8.4 million for teacher compensation to implement the agreement. You don't get to spend $8.4 million if you can't demonstrate to the ministry that that's what it actually costs to meet your collective agreement language. And the other part is $409,000 for overhead and operating expenditures, and that's where we have some suggestions. So the next slide is what does it sort of starting to look like? At this point, what you see in here is by school what the classroom component of the staffing was in 2016-2017. So in elementary schools this year, there's 182 classroom teachers. There's lots of non-enrolling and services around the outside of those classrooms. There's 182 classrooms. So looking at the estimated classroom requirements for next year when the language is implemented, and that's best guessed. I mean, kids will change. This is looking at the designations that are there today rolled over by a grade, looking at the way they blend within the language, because certainly there's new class size minimums which are part of the need for additional classrooms, but there's also the composition challenge, and that composition challenge is dynamic. This is the best guess for the purposes of planning for facilities. So you can see that in elementary, we think there's going to be about 29 additional classrooms. That could be more, it could be less, depending on how the students arrive in September, at what schools and in what numbers and with what potential designations. But that's a best guess today. Not every school has the space. So on there's a couple of portables that we know to accommodate those students. There's no choice at Crofton or Drinkwater but to bring in additional space if those students do arrive. Most of the other schools have space that would need to be repurposed. So that includes a variety of different types of rooms, but the ministry's directive is that if there's a classroom in the school, it should first be used as a classroom. So in looking at that, there's a lot of reclaimed space there within those schools. They were already getting quite full, a lot of them, or they've expanded into most of their rooms, a lot of our schools, but now a lot of that space will need to be reclaimed. So a little more complicated at secondary, where we've just gone and had to make some estimates and tested those estimates with one of our large secondary schools to see if it was reasonable. Where we see the most pressures is at Cowichan Secondary, of course, the largest population, and probably the fullest of the highest occupancy of the board's 4 secondary schools. Chemainus and Lake Cowichan and Francis Kelsey appear to have more space available than Cowichan Secondary does. So best estimate would be the need for additional space here of 6 classrooms.
Trustee Smith, Trustee Croft.
Are we gonna alter our business case to the Ministry of Education regarding the replacement of Cowichan Secondary School based on this data of that school being really full now?
Yeah, we'll have to reflect on that and see how that impacts, because that will change. The class sizes are now smaller under the class size and composition. Now they're smaller when you're meeting the composition requirements, and they're smaller when there's a split grade. So certainly that changes the space requirements at Cowichan Secondary. I completely agree, but we haven't evolved our thinking that far yet, but certainly
It doesn't hurt our.
that work will need to be done.
Okay, I was just
Yeah.
thinking if this is such a pressure, then maybe this might be an opportunity.
Trustee Croft.
Okay.
The 6 possible portables at Cowichan Secondary, is that distributed over 2 campuses, or is one school for all 6? Do we know yet?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm sure it's a blend, but we just haven't quite. Again, we're very preliminary. We know that by the end of next week, we're required to submit capital requirements to the Ministry of Education. So we're really on best guesses. All districts are around what are you going to need. It really depends on the blend of students and the course offerings and how they all fit, and the complications of individual collective agreement language. So what this school district may require will be different than neighboring school districts if they have different language. And if they have different capacity, if your schools were already fuller or not as full. It's a very complicated puzzle. This is a best guess that 54 classrooms in total would be required over this year for classrooms. Now, some of those are certainly, again, used by teachers within the Learn and Improvement Fund and probably within the Priority Measures Fund, which have been rolled into this fund. So we're not saying that there's 54 new teachers that need to be hired to the district, because some of the teachers are already supported out of those other funding that has been rolled into this Classroom Enhancement Fund. But just wanted to sort of, again, update the board with where we're thinking the pressures are. Okay, so then the next slide is on the utilization of the overhead and operating fund expenditure. So we're hoping to have more in here. We got confirmation from the ministry that the absenteeism replacement for those teachers needed to come out of the overhead cost. So each teacher costs approximately $3,500 a year in additional costs for sick leave. The average is about 10 days a year. And at about $350 TTOC, a teacher on call. It's a significant piece of the pot of money that's there. So we had a whole bunch of other stuff on this list. When we originally started creating it, then we asked that question, and I'm glad we did, so we know, but I'm also not glad that we did, because now we know that the absenteeism has to come out of there. So we had a higher amount for custodial originally, and then realized that a lot of the classrooms are currently in use for other purposes that are being reclaimed. So we basically put that 1.0 FTE in there to represent the new portable space that would be required to be cleaned, and it may not even be the right amount. It was our best guess at the moment. The big item there, and I'll let the superintendent speak more to it, is around a district principal of student services to start to track all of this. Like, there's monthly compliance, there's complications around the reporting, there's additional supports needed for staff, and I'll let Rod elaborate if he wishes, but that's where we were hoping to grab some of those funds for that position.
So this would be a position that would work with the superintendent, Deb Mauch. The compliance issues around the composition are required to be calculated monthly. Well, in elementary, that's somewhat manageable. In secondary, it will be really challenging. We also know that as the Secretary Treasurer said, some of those supports that have been around students previously through LIF and the last 17 and a half teachers that we got through the Memorandum of Understanding previously, those will be going into classroom focused positions as opposed to supporting teachers from the edges. Those will now go into classroom positions. So we need to be thinking about how we're supporting the learning of our teachers, as we talked about earlier in this piece. That will be part of this fund, this position, to help support the students as they're more dispersed. They have the same learning needs. We will be addressing those increasingly across the province through smaller class size. And so the need to work with teachers, improving their skill set in that area will be important. And it just, by a huge factor, increases the ongoing conversations between classroom teachers, district office, around, and principals, of course, around the kinds of supports that teachers and students are requiring in a far more fluid environment than we've been in the past.
Trustee Smith?
I guess, excuse my ignorance when I ask this question, but I could have sworn that was Deb's job when we brought her in here, was to do the compliance piece, to do all of that. So why do we need another one?
There's a compliance piece.
Yep.
There's,
Sorry, I'm
yeah,
not.
no, it's a good
It's
question.
just that we're
There-
talking about 154,000, and
Yep.
we need so many other things that.
There is a compliance piece, but there is also a requirement to focus on changing the landscape of the classrooms that those students are in. Working with far more on inclusion, which would be more of Deb's job then doing that, and then this person taking on some of those compliance pieces. As we really come to understand the need for our schools and our classrooms to be really inclusive, our teachers to have the skill sets that they need to do that, our schools to philosophically understand what that feels like, for our parents to understand that. That takes staff and time to get us there. So this essentially frees the assistant superintendent up, although it's a partnership obviously, to continue to work more fully with our staff in schools, with our district itinerant staff as they're developing their skill set, and as they're working to support teachers and students out in schools. It just provides that extra layer of leadership and support.
Just to follow up, The only reason why I'm confused is when we went through restructuring, it was made really clear when I followed the then trustee, that, you know, that the structure of our staff and what it looked like, you know, we had the director of elementary, director of middle secondary, director of student sports services, we had that, and it was made really clear to us through that process that that wasn't required, it was rolled into 2 assistant superintendents. So I'm just thinking we're going back to where we were in a roundabout way. Yeah, we are.
I
And
I can't comment on that.
No, I know,
wasn't
but
here,
I'm just-
I think in terms of what we're seeing, in terms of the need to do the job that you have asked around transformation and changing what those classrooms are like and the experiences of kids, we need to be on that and be leading that. So it's not that we need just that we need additional compliance work. We need some really focused work on that and can't take our eye off that ball. But we also need the leadership in changing to the kind of classrooms that we all want. And our teachers, as I said, no one's fighting us on this. Everybody wants that information. Everybody wants to try this and get there, but it needs some pretty consistent work. We have a lot of work to do in that area and have had for a long time.
Mr. Cox?
So when you talk about inclusion and supporting teachers and including more students, we're talking about special needs students here, having more, you know, a more comfortable experience in the class with and the teacher having a more comfortable experience. Is that where this is going?
That's part, for sure, that's part of it, but it's also all students.
Sure.
It's getting to that personalized place where all of our students are feeling included, whether they are designated or not. It changes the complexity of the kinds of things we're asking our teachers to do and the kinds of things that they're being asked to do in classrooms. Again, it's no longer a teacher has a nice little group of grade 6s and they teach the same thing to every kid and turn the page on the second day. Those might have been the case. We used to believe that perhaps at one time, but it's not. And so to get us into that new place, we need the horsepower to get there.
Mr. Cox?
Can you give me an example of sort of the skill set that you're looking for in there? So are you talking about someone who's transformational, someone who's experts in all different kinds of children and teaching? Like, how does that roll out?
In this position,
Yes.
this position would take on much of the compliance piece,
Yeah.
freeing up the assistant superintendent who has all those skill sets to actually get out of the room next door and actually get out into schools and classrooms and working with teachers and staffs and students to do that, which is very much that inclusionary vision.
So I have heard over our years that there are a lot of students with special needs who don't have adequate support, or perhaps there's some sort of difficulty where students are falling through the cracks a bit, that teachers need more and more support. We have more students with special needs than we've ever had and seem to be increasing. And I think part of responding to that for me would be leadership in terms of how to go about that. And so I would make the assumption that the district principal would have a very high skill set and be able to support principals, teachers, the school-based team in providing that support. So one of the big areas, even in the survey that came through, was students with behavior issues. So I would hope that the qualifications that are sought around this position would include someone who has significant behavior leadership.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jason?
Moving on to the absentee replacement piece. So it's come to our attention that not everybody knows that that means that, right? You guys asked the question, as you said, and you wish you hadn't asked the question, because now. So is that, with sick leave the way it is now, is that even a realistic figure on 50 to 70 teachers in a school year, $185,000 in replacement? Yeah, it isn't.
Well, that's over 50 teachers at $3,500.
No, it's over 50 to 70 teachers.
It's probably not, there's both, the enrolling component are the teachers that are typically replaced. Non-enrolling usually are not replaced, so it's on the classroom component that they.
And is there anything we can do about that?
Do you want to answer that?
Well, I'll just tell you where we are with trying to find out about it, and that is, we talked about our astonishment that half of our operating funding for the new teachers would have to go to their replacement, and meanwhile we have all the other support needs that can be identified: custodial time, school furniture. Well, the amount there would cover one classroom.
It's a rounding item.
Yeah, there's all kinds of additional support needs for 50 new teachers. So to have to spend that on absenteeism is very difficult. So we have requested clarification on that to the provincial team, and hopefully we'll have an answer very soon.
Excellent, thank you.
So I have two questions. First of all, the school furniture for opening up 20, 30 some odd new portable classrooms. The repurposing of music rooms, they would not be furnished as a traditional classroom is or a classroom is. Where are we pulling these out of a boneyard or?
There aren't more students per se, they're in different classrooms. So it's a significant redistribution likely.
We can move those
And-
wire cage desks to different places.
Excellent, because I love those.
It's smaller class sizes, smaller classrooms, so there'll be surplus furniture within existing classrooms as they start to spread within the school. But schools remain the same size.
But you will have theoretically a laptop for each teacher, a projector, those type of resources, a desk and a chair maybe, that, where would they come from?
The technology has to come from the existing technology budget. It was an item that, again, another item that we
Technology
originally
wasn't here.
had on the list. We had clerical on the list. We had a number of things on the list until we ended up with the absenteeism item. So it certainly was thought about up until late yesterday afternoon.
So things like technology would have to be just a
Redistribution of the
redistribution
operating.
of what we have in technology.
And my comment on the district principal student service, possible for our next meeting to get an org chart of our organization in terms of what we have now and what is proposed in this budget, because we're not just talking about one position, we're talking about a couple other district roles, and who are these individuals responsible to and their new scope of work and responsibility of the agency. Trustee, sorry, Smith.
So, for our maintenance department, who we all know is already slammed and have a heck of a time getting through the work orders they already have. So now we're talking about our maintenance teams are gonna have to go into schools and start moving furniture all over the schools to build those new classrooms, because we know that other folks cannot do that work. So, what is that gonna look like? I guess my question is that we constantly get, when you go to visit your schools, you're always reminded about work orders and how long they take to get to, and it's gonna take them quite some time to redistribute furniture throughout the district or throughout each of the schools and so on and so forth. I mean, what's that gonna, I'm sorry when I'm looking at you, but what's that gonna look like? Because that's, I'm sorry, but because of the what if component and the best guess scenario, what does that look like for those folks that are trying to, I don't know. Like I said, I wouldn't wanna be any of you guys, but
I don't know if we have an answer other than it has to get done by September. Really, I mean, it's, the cards were dealt, that's just what it is. It will have to take priority and it will happen.
Mr. Sandquist, anything else for the board?
There's another slide. Next steps.
what a Debbie Downer.
It's the best line.
It's the final part here. So just what's left. So again, staff continue to work on developing options to balance the budget. There's a lot to reflect on from this meeting. Things have been communicated that need to be brought back, and that will be brought back at April 25th. The goal at April 25th is to have the Board Education and Business Committee recommend a balanced budget to the board. That board will meet on April 27th, 2 days later. So the assembly of that budget will happen in those 2 days. We're moving at very quick speed here. So on April 27th, we hope that first and second reading at that special board meeting will occur on the budget. Then the third reading is expected to occur on May 2nd, which will allow the staffing process to be underway on May 3rd. What's not up there is on April 28th, the facility implication request has to be into the ministry, to the capital branch, to support the movement of portables or renovations in classrooms. So that'll happen probably over the weekend, and we'll be ready for that next week, so we can get that going. But it's just such a tight timeline in trying to fit this all together this year. So that's all I had. And my next slide was,
Thanks for coming out.
well, pretty much it was, do you have any questions?
You see your family?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I must have. Still.
She's busy too.
Any closing comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Susan. No business, motion to adjourn.
Very